Welcome to another episode of Integrity Matters by Turnitin. My name is Chupudi, and today with me in the house is Paul of Taylor's College. Paul, can you tell us a bit about your background, your role at Taylor's College, and just generally about your role as a researcher?
Yeah, so I'm the academic director at Taylor's College in Sydney, and our college is a preparation college for international students who wish to go to the University of Sydney. So our mandate is to introduce overseas students to Western culture, the Australian way of doing things, introduce them to teaching practices that might not be so familiar in their country, obviously increase the quality of their English language so they're able to go to the university and compete with local students who perhaps have grown up speaking English since the day they were born. To definitely get them ready for the university in all aspects, which includes academic integrity issues.
Great. That's good to hear about your role at Taylor's College. My first question today is looking at knowing that you are very popular in the space of innovative learning experience for students. So I just want to understand what your process is for innovation in pedagogy and how you work collaboratively with the staff to improve on those processes and show that they are informing learning for your students.
Okay, thanks for that. So I'm known as an early adopter when it comes to technology, and I was one of the first people who had a website in Australia back in 1988. That was way before some of the browsers that we've got today. And I was experimenting in the very early 90s with putting content online and creating engaging content. So years later, when learning management systems were created, it's like, oh, wow, you're giving me a device where there's different packages for things like quizzes and assignments and content, students in groups, so you can sort of have class groups and so on. So that was really a great platform to start with. We use Moodle as our platform, but there are a number of other brands out there. And what I did is years ago, I took my physics course and I had to go, how can I put this online? And, most subjects have chapters in a study guide or something. So I basically created pages on our website for the different chapters, and then started embedding questions between them, and a colleague started making videos for them. So, but my pedagogical play is always in my own subject area first, and then when I feel competent with what we're doing with our own students, then I start mapping it out across the college. But a lot of this is backed up by attending conferences. So I've attended a number of conferences over the years in Moodle, which is the learning management system, digital schools and how to become a digital school. And I subscribe to a number of blogs and things. So I try and keep up to date with the conversation. And of course, there's always Google. If you can't find an answer, go to Google and look things up. So I might open a dozen web pages and read 4 of them. All of that informs me but then how I can create the best product for our students.
Oh, great. So now that we understand your process of innovating, I'm working with pedagogy to inform learning of students. Let's look at the aspect of assessment for students. Now, a crucial part of authentic assessment is what we popularly know as academic honesty. How would you describe academic honesty, and how does this inform the process of assessment design?
Academic honesty, we call it academic integrity at our school. We like the word integrity. Integrity implies to us a greater belief in your own values. So I'm a person with integrity, so I behave in integrity. And part of that integrity is honesty in my assessments and the work I do, whether it's submitting an assignment whether it's learning to paraphrase and summarize correctly rather than quoting other people's material incorrectly, acknowledging a person through referencing. All of that is about academic integrity. The other end of that, though, is the rather sad side of it, where students are buying essays online. We suspect that they might be using people to help them do exams, because our exams are online now. So there's a lot of material out there, and our students are vulnerable to all of that. They actually get approached by these vendors. They don't necessarily have to go and look for them. They get approached for them. So we've been using the Turnitin software for over a decade now to ensure that the students' assignments are their own work. And we don't try and use Turnitin punitively. We want to use Turnitin educationally for our students. So our students get to see the Turnitin reports in their assignments, and then they have a few more days to modify their reports and present a better product. So that's what we do for assignments. Online exams are the big issue now, and so we've gone through a few stages with our online exams. We started with invigilation using Zoom, and I think we're very lucky to get away with that because Zoom doesn't allow us to follow enough of what the students are doing. But now we have some invigilation software. There's a few brands out there, but we chose the brand Iris. And it allows us to watch the student's computer monitor and anything they do on the computer screen while at the same time observing the student. But nothing's foolproof. And even on face-to-face exams where students are sitting in classrooms at school, students cheat. So we're not going to stop cheating. We just have to make it harder, and we make the consequences of being caught serious.
That's great to hear, especially the aspect of how you're using the proctoring to actually support student learning. So we're just going to move a little bit further and think about active learning in the online space. And there's this aspect of gamification, which is exciting. Everyone wants to have games because it keeps everyone engaged in learning. But we also know that creating these elements or this learning objects in subjects or courses requires some level of time and cost. So I'm trying to work out, or what I would like to hear from you is how you support academics in thinking about the cost and the time they take into consideration while designing courses and assessments, and if there are any best practices you've learned from experience that actually speeds up the process to create a very active course.
Well, I might come back to gamification in a little while, but the learning management systems have a number of really useful tools, and one of the tools I like the most is, on our system, it's called Lesson. And it allows you to have a series of pages with content, and the content can be videos, it can be text and images that you've copied out of an original paper study guide. And then in between these pages, you embed questions. And the questions are not complicated questions. They're what we call concrete questions. And they're designed to test understanding. So they're low-order questions, but they're there to test understanding. So the student can work through these lessons, read material, answer some questions, read a few more pages, answer some more questions. And I've spent a number of years developing it for my own course. And over about the last 8 years, I've been encouraging my colleagues to embed lessons in their own subjects. And we've had some success with that. It is quite a lot of work, but once the investment's made, it's there. And it offers a lot of advantage over paper. I mean, you've got a video. In my subject, it's conceptually challenging, so using animations, and there are lots of animations on the internet where you can drag sliders and push buttons and adjust values and see the different effects on that. So it's like a virtual experiment that you can do. The student can do it at their own leisure. Yeah. So these are all really powerful tools. And we now, when we first were experimenting with that, the assessment was for learning. As we became more confident in the process, we made that become a formative assessment process. So it became assessment for grades, because it was a significant part of our course to complete those, because that's where the learning was. And that allowed us to flip the way we teach. So you may have heard of this modality of teaching called flipped learning. Flipped learning is not new. It's actually go home and read this piece of poem or something else for homework so we can discuss it in class tomorrow. But the internet created a really good platform for flipped learning. So what we do now is we try and use those resources and get the students to go through those for homework and then come into the classroom next day, and then we do the more complicated discussions and the questions and the problems to go with that. So that was an excellent tool called Lesson. And then Lesson and Quiz and some of the other tools allowed me to start exploring gamification. So I had to become an expert in the technology before I could really get into exploring gamification. And I did quite a bit of research on gamification, and there are some blogs out there by some world experts, and you know, some of these people go to the conferences. Sadly, there's no gamification conference in Australia. I would love to go to one in the UK or Europe, wherever it is. But one of the pieces of advice I got from one of these blogs is it's really difficult to write a good game in the hard sciences. It's in chemistry, which is my subject. It's quite easy to gamify a police inquiry and investigation. It's easier to gamify you're the Prime Minister of Australia working with the Treasurer, and you've got $1 million to invest in XYZ You know, those sorts of things you can gamify, but it's very challenging in my subject, physics, to gamify, because if you start bringing in the hard content, it stops being a game and it gets boring. If you make it too game-like, then the content is trivial, and so it's a real challenge to get the balance between science and game right. So I've written one little game. It's not very long. It only has like about 5 conditions, 5 ifs that students have to work through. But it's my proof of concept. And I do look forward to spending time going back and working on it. And all of these things, though, it works better if you bounce off colleagues, if there's 2 or 3 of you working together. And at the moment, I don't have anyone to work with, but I'm really pleased a new member of staff joined our college in the last term, the last couple of months, and she's into gamification. So I'm going to be discussing her ideas for gamifying and my ideas, and see if we can perhaps work together on my project and maybe work together on her project. And we have other interests in our college, but everyone's sort of going, how does it work? What can you do? And so on. So it is quite a challenging process, but I am very proud that I was able to take my game to a Moodle conference and present, and it generated a lot of interest. So I was very pleased with that outcome.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is that it does take a lot of time to put together the games, and in some contexts or in some disciplines it's a lot easier, and others it's quite challenging to put together. And from experience, I would say that, or just adding to that, is that creating templates actually does work in terms of as a practice. It could be that once these templates are created, other disciplines could apply them in some shape or form, and that way it would save time in terms of reuse and repurposing and so forth. So now with gamification and the online space, we know with COVID now, with the pandemic as we're facing, everything is moved online, and there's that level of institutions or worry, I'll say level of worry about academic integrity in terms of students learning in the online space. What are some best practices that we can, or institutions or academics can take into consideration to ensure that online activities have a high level of integrity or academic integrity?
Well, I think one of the most important things to do is to know your students. And at our college, we have the luxury of having classes of around 25 students per teacher. So the teacher can get to know quite intimately the students. And, you know, we sit and we teach through Zoom. So we have a Zoom room and you can see all 25 students on a Zoom tile, and you can ask them and, you know, talk to them, get questions from them. And so that helps, knowing the student, because then when it comes to assessment, if an assignment is handed in and we're looking at the assignment and then we go, but we know this student's like this, and we go, that doesn't fit, okay, then alarm bells go off in the teacher's mind, and we start an academic integrity process where we interview the student and we ask them to explain some of the answers to that assignment. And it comes out fairly quickly, and quite often they'll admit, oh yeah, I felt precious and I bought an essay. I didn't know what to do, so my cousin helped me. You know, this sort of thing comes out in the interviews very clearly. Some students will deny that they bought it, but you ask them to explain some of the bigger words or the bigger phrases or a paragraph, and they clearly cannot explain that. One of the interesting things is coming through is if you talk to people about what is academic integrity, and there is an international Center for Academic Integrity that's based in North America, and I attended their conference early this year. One of their definitions of academic integrity is that if you're a student studying for subjects in an English language, then you need to write it in the English language. And one of the practices of our students is writing it in their own language and flipping it through Google Translate, which is quite accurate these days, and then submitting it. And what they wrote in Chinese, they may have understood. It's translated to English. They don't necessarily understand the English in the paragraphs that they've written. And it's a really grey area that we're still trying to wrestle with, because it's becoming more prevalent with the success of Google Translate or any other translation package that's out there.
Thanks for listening. This concludes part 1 of our conversation. Please join us again for part 2.